Okay, I've been meaning to make this video for quite some time now about what the field of a ring magnet actually looks like, and everything you'll find online or any paper, the actual field vectors of magnetic divergence and convergence, centripetal and centrifugal, are all incorrect. What we have here is a 1-inch neodymium iron boron. It's 5 mils thick with a 3/4 inch center, and what you're looking at it as the first ever seen video of anywhere, video or otherwise, accurate description, and I will show you here in a second what is going on. Accurate description of magnetic field reciprocation, which is force and motion, and centripetally is return to inertia, i.e. acceleration. I'll get into that later, and also into the book, of course. But you're seeing the first video of what magnetic field is at with a ring magnet. And now I'm going to tilt the ferrocell so you can get an edge-on view of the depth of field. It takes a second for the center to develop. I'll try to block out the light here so you're able to see. Now, if you bring up a diagram, also the introductory picture for this video is the incorrect but accepted version of field mediation at the center of a ring magnet, which is incorrect. You'll notice the hypertrochoid-like or spirograph ball at the center of this ring magnet, the void at the center of this ring magnet. All field speculations and diagrams are merely theoretical. This is the first you're actually seeing genuine field reciprocation on a ring magnet. And it's unfortunate you don't actually have a ferrocell. You can certainly get one from Tim Vanderelli's associate. Incredible depth of field. You have approximately 4 inches plus holographic-like field depth of field view on what is basically 1 micron thin of ferrofluid between these two optical grade lenses, which is absolutely fantastic. Anyway, at the center here, the best I could actually show you on this video is that if you look closely, everybody's held a ball of twine in their hand, just a ball of hardware grade twine that's wrapped like a ball and is spiraling from one side to the next, and that's exactly what is at the center of a ferrocell, as you're seeing magnetic field reciprocations in the center of a ring magnet. If you bring up a diagram of field reciprocation at the center of a ring magnet online, you'll get an inaccurate, a totally inaccurate view that at the center of a ring magnet, the North Poles or the South Pole, it doesn't make any difference, like butt heads in the middle, and then they worm their way to the center and reciprocate to the other side. Well, not only not having the ferrocell in hand, what I know about magnetism, which is infinitely extensive, that's absolutely impossible. I mean, pressure mediation and simplex fluid dynamics, which all field pressure mediations follow, can't actually do that. It's a complete absurdity. Let me bring the light up and show you what's going on at the center of a ring magnet, then I'll return to the ferrocell here in a second. As at the center of the ring magnet, let me bring my hands here so you can see. Maybe you can't see. Tracking focus is off. Yeah, let me bring the ferrocell back up. Yeah, I have too low light of a situation. We'll make a second video so you can actually see it. Now I'm going to place the ring magnet on the surface. Let me wipe the ferrocell really quickly. Anyway, the point being is that you have interlacing field pressure mediations. Just wiping the bit of residue so you get the cleanest image possible on the ferrocell. What you have is what is a perfect interlacing of field pressure mediations at the center of the ring magnet. Here we have, instead of at the bottom of the ferrocell, we have the ring magnet upon the surface of the ferrocell. Give it a second to develop like a piece of photographic film and you'll see it. If I hold it in place perfectly steady, then I'll be able to retain the image. Remember, what you're seeing is LED light being shot in from the side of the ferrocell into the center and all around, and of course the ferrofluid nanoparticles. The mixture, now you'll see the image develop, and you'll actually see, as I turn it here on its side, you'll actually see a sphere. A sphere, imagine, like I said, in your mind, you're able to visualize it, a ball of twine. Of course, far more intricate and perfectly spaced and mediated. Just imagine a ball of twine, not below this. Remember, the ferrocell is below it. But even if I place the magnet below it, you're still imagining that the ball is either on one side or the other. The actual projected force motion ball of magnetic field reciprocation is directly in the center, like a perfect sphere with either side sitting perfectly spaced. If I actually stick a sphere magnet in the middle of this, which I've done in another video, you actually see that the sphere magnet sits perfectly. It'll always self-center itself at the center of this ring magnet, just like Saturn and its rings. So what you're seeing actually is the magnetic field reciprocation for the first time. Nobody's ever seen this before. At least not on video. There's some photographs by the professor in Louisville who actually recreates these ferrocells, but this is the first video anybody's ever seen. But anyway, there's a projected. You can partially see it here. I'm trying to give you the holographic depth of field of the ferrocell, which you can only very slightly see here, but it is substantial if you're actually able to have one in your hands. Anyway, you have a full sphere of pressure-mediated inertia reacceleration of the divergent field reciprocation, trying to mediate itself out through the center of this ring magnet. And of course, if you take a cross-section of any ring magnet and look at it edgewise, which is how magnetic field pressure mediations are diagrammed, like a donut cut in half. In other words, if I were to take this ring magnet, cut it in half, and look at its field pressures edge on, you'll see absolutely every speculative projection out there, math or otherwise, and there are a couple math ones. There are some video projections based upon an algorithm. They're all incorrect. They actually show a pointed top-like projection, top and bottom, and show the field reciprocations butting heads at the dead center of the magnet, but that does not occur. Even without the ferrocell, that is absolutely impossible. I mean, that sort of asinine fluid dynamics inverse logic is utterly impossible to explain field pressure mediation in the center of a ring magnet. So for the first time, you'll actually be able to see here that as I move the magnet, it'll take a few seconds for the image to redevelop. Let me move it around really quick, and you'll actually be able to see it develop before your eyes. If I bring it into perfect focus here on the camera, where I actually focused it when I hit the shutter release button. And of course, along the edges, you're able to see the centrifugal clockwise and counterclockwise hash marks of the lights as they are being scattered to your eyes through the ferrocell lenses on either side, in between which is sandwiched the ferrofluid. So what you're seeing obviously is the light being shot in from the sides, but the actual scattered light is being scattered off of the ferrofluid, which is falling into the flux line divergences and convergences of the magnetic field reciprocations, which are force and motion definitionally. As I'll get into much later and on in the book, technically, of course, I've talked about in the book endlessly, but it's not correct to speak colloquially about a magnetic field. Is perfectly fine as a contrivance, but ultimately magnetism is not a field. It's like, well, what are you saying now? Are you contradicting yourself? Well, no, that's not the case. I mean, that was the more in-depth part that I needed to get into later in the book, obviously. There's only one field, and that's dielectricity, which is pure inertia. Magnetism is the loss of inertia, which is force and motion. Everything which props up the visible empirical cosmos is force and motion, not inertia and acceleration. Magnetic reciprocation centrifugally is force and motion. Centripetal convergence is inertia and acceleration, or reintegration, or synthesis, i.e. convergence. That is the way the cosmos works. That's every action requires a reaction. Force and motion are necessitated, inertia and acceleration. divergence and convergence. That's why there are no straight lines in the universe. I want to get on to another point that I'm actually going to cover in depth in the book. Actually trying to cover it here is somewhat difficult, but I'm going to try to do it. You see I've got a sphere magnet over here. Actually a disk magnet instead of a ring magnet. I wanted to show you something. Let me put the disk magnet underneath the ferrocell. Now if you look closely, you notice as I move the magnet, it doesn't matter if I move it here or there, it doesn't matter how I turn the ferrocell or the magnet, it doesn't make any difference. The ferrocell is evenly ringed with LEDs, white light LEDs. You notice as whichever direction I push, and it doesn't matter which direction the Earth's magnetic field is in. Any motion that I actually direct the disk magnet, is a 5/8 inch disk magnet underneath here. Doesn't matter if it's a ring magnet, disk magnet, cube magnet, makes no difference on the magnet. Any direction that I press it in, I get rarefaction on the leading edge and compression on the trailing edge. I have redshift. Now this gets into the phase shift of magnetic divergence and convergence. You have rarefaction on the North Pole and compression on the South Pole. Although this is bluish green, you have blue shift. This also explains from 7 different people and 60 years of biological experimentation, a la Rawls and Davis, Magnetic Blueprint in Life, and the rest, and my many experiments with biological experimentation. Why? And it doesn't have to do with the dipolar nature of water, which has another effect from magnetic field effects as they're exposed, but has to do with compression and rarefaction between the South Pole and the North Pole. North Pole is rarefaction, South Pole is compression, and this is all due to geomagnetic precession and the Lamar frequency, but specifically it has to do with the phase difference between the North Pole and the South Pole as magnetic field divergences, force and motion, are reciprocated and reintegrated. Of course, reintegration processes, inertia and acceleration. An even and unbroken chain of force and motion and inertia and acceleration, obviously on any magnet in the universe, whether it be atomic or a large magnet like this, or the gigantic beast magnet behind me that weighs 30 pounds. So anyway, I want to show you again. Any direction I place this magnet in, you'll notice I have rarefaction on the leading edge and compression on the trailing edge. You'll notice the leading edge is always red, so I have redshift and rarefaction on the leading edge. Look at that. Any way I move this magnet spatially, in space and time, remember there are no fields in space and in time. Space is a posterior attribute of fields. Magnetism ultimately is not a field, it is a force and motion. It is a loss and divergence of inertia, i.e. dielectricity. There's only one field. Gravity, of course, is not a field. Magnetism is not a field. Electricity is not a field. Electricity, of course, is dielectric and electrical components. Electricity is a combination of magnetism and dielectricity, obviously, but magnetism is not a field. There's only one field. The universe is divinely simple. It takes a great deal of thoughtfulness and investigation to understand that, but that is ultimately the case. So we can talk conventionally about magnetic fields, and as I've done in the book, but to get into the more advanced details of what magnetism is, we ultimately have to get to the facts, and to nail down brass tacks, we cannot any longer call magnetism a field. Magnetism is a force and motion. It is a divergence, the loss of inertia, which reintegrates as inertia and acceleration upon reciprocation, and centripetal synthesis, or convergence. You actually can see it here in the extreme depth of field. You can see this extreme depth of field, this deep holographic. Remember, you're only looking at 1 micron. You are looking at 1 micron of ferrofluid. Now you can possibly see 3 inches of depth here, but if you actually had this ferrocell in your hand, you're actually able to see 5 or more inches of depth. It is quite extreme. Anyway, you're able to see the counterclockwise and the clockwise spirals around this magnet. You see the hypertrochoid pattern, just like a sunflower. Everything in nature follows the lowest path of mediation. Is simple golden ratio, logarithmic expressions, follows simplex fluid dynamics. Doesn't matter whether it's fluid or the loss of inertia. You have a hypertrochoid pattern here, but the hypertrochoid is only apparently so because you have clockwise and counterclockwise spatial convergences and divergences of the magnetic reciprocation, centrifugally and centripetally. And you also have, additionally, of course, getting into the more complex aspects, the rarefaction and compression of the North Pole and the South Pole. North Pole is rarefaction and South Pole has a phase shift towards compression. This also explains, as I said before many times, decades of biological experiments by Rawls, Davids, others, including myself. I reproduced the results many times. You actually have time dilation. I'll get into that more later. You have actually time dilation. Rawls Davis actually came to the same conclusion. You have time dilation on the South Pole, and you have time compression, rarefaction on the North Pole. Let me show it to you again, since I didn't really paint that very clearly for you. You'll notice that on the leading edge of movement, you see I have redshift. Doesn't matter which direction I push it, which side of the magnet it is. North Pole or South Pole. The leading edge, we're talking about movement. Right now we're not talking about whether the North Pole is rarefied or the South Pole is rarefied. We're talking about magnetic divergence. The leading edge of spatial movement is rarefaction and redshift. You'll see the red up here, and you see the greenish, blues, and yellows down here. The trailing edge is always compression and blue shift. The leading edge is always rarefaction and redshift. Look, no matter which way you actually press the magnet, underneath the ferrocell, how the ferrocell is rotated, it doesn't matter if I even actually have the other strips of LEDs. The direction of travel is always rarefaction and redshift. The trailing edge is compression and blue shift. Ultimately, I'd have to be moving this a whole lot faster for you to see blue shift. I've only got so much room of travel here. Obviously, only so much movement, only so much speed, but you can see it here. You can actually see it regardless of the color, that I have dispersion at the leading edge. So I have rarefaction and redshift on leading, and compression and blue shift on trailing. This explains all biological experiments, explains geomagnetic precession, explains phase shift, which must necessitatively exist as the differential between magnetic divergence between North and South Pole of any magnet in the universe, whether it's on the atomic scale or on the macro scale like this large magnet here. Makes no difference. And of course here we have at the dead center of any magnet, which is indivisible. If I were to cut this magnet top to bottom like a hunk of salami, the dielectric inertial plane, i.e. this white line here, as I've stated to you many times, the indivisible center of inertia is indivisible. No matter how many times I cut this magnet, each little slice will look exactly like this. Or if I put 3 of these magnets together, it will look exactly the same. It is always self-centering. There's no dielectric inertial plane located at the center of any magnet. It is concentrated at, it is forced at, due to simplex field pressure mediation, as necessitatively so. Just like water rolling downhill to the lowest depression, it's the same thing. Magnetic divergence, North and South Pole, the dielectric inertial plane. If you can't actually see it through the camera, but actually holding the ferrocell, you're actually able to see a huge divot, a very deep divot, like a very low valley at the center of the middle of the magnet. So, we've talked about compression and rarefaction, and we talked about redshift and blue shift, time dilation on the South Pole due to the phase shift, geomagnetic precession, necessitated phase difference between North and South Pole, and for the first time ever, as I was happy to show you, let me bring up the ring magnet again. I've actually got some other ring magnet experiments to show you. Of course, I can't find the ring magnet now. It's hard to see in absolute darkness. That I'll show you again in the next little video. What is going on? This is the first time you're actually able to see with detail what is at the center of a ring magnet. It is not like any diagrams you'll find on Google under images or any explanations using postulated algorithms. Pressure mediation cannot exist that way. It looks like a perfectly mediated out ball of twine because obviously each side of the ring magnet, just like a regular magnet, North Pole one side, South Pole the other. Any diagram you've seen is incorrect with the fields butt heads in the center and reciprocate to the other side. That does not exist. It cannot exist, and this is proof of it. You can see it here, painted via light from the micron thin ferrofluid. As the Faraday effect is in play, because the ferrofluid is causing scattering of the light, so you're actually able to see Mother Nature with her skin peeled off right to the bone. What is at the center of a ring magnet? And it's very simple. I'll show you again in the next little video. It'll be like a 50-second clip. You're able to understand it very, very simply. Remember, you have field pressure mediation trying to reciprocate, but it has to interlace between each other, and it creates right at the center of any ring magnet a perfect little sphere, like a ball of twine sitting at the center of this little ring magnet. Any ring magnet, ceramic, samarium, cobalt, neodymium iron boron, doesn't matter what sort of magnet it is. Same is true of even the Earth's core. So, thanks for watching. So you're able to see for the first time what is going on at the center of a ring magnet, and it is absolutely unlike and disproves everything else you've seen about field pressure mediation at the center of any ring magnet. It is a perfect little sphere of interlacing field pressure mediations. I talked to you about rarefaction and compression. Talked to you about the phase differential and dilation, which explains all biological experimentation. And I've basically scuffed upon the fact of what I'm going to discuss later and greatly in the book, of which I've got enormous, copious writings on. As we get more into depth on magnetism, which makes you wonder how in-depth you can go, but obviously you can go very in-depth, as I very well knew, because this is a daunting task that's just impossible to ever complete, that magnetism is not a field. There's only one field, and that is dielectricity. It is the ether. It is pure inertia. What is the ether? The ether is inertia. How is it brought into existence? That's 1 over 5 to the power of -3, my discovery from 14 some years ago. Magnetism is force in motion. It is field pressure mediation. Magnetism is not a field. Magnetism is the loss of inertia, which is force in motion. It is pressure mediation. It is what props up the entire empirical cosmos, or as the Greeks said, the cosmos ethithos. So the dielectric inertial plane would be the cosmos noitos, the indivisible center of every magnet, incorrectly called the block wall. This white line, which you see here, that sits at the center of every magnet, not located there, centered there, forced there by simple fluid dynamics, but this is not fluid dynamics, but it follows the exact same rules of fluid dynamics. Lowest pressure mediation. Inertia, acceleration, force and motion of ether modality expressions follow the exact same rules, mostly, as fluid dynamics. I mean, Mother Nature is really simple. Mother is, I think Tesla, or I can't remember who said it, but somebody said, I forget if it was Tesla or not, said that Mother Nature doesn't do math, okay? She only understands centrifugal, centripetal, charge, discharge, divergence, and convergence. That's all Mother Nature knows. She doesn't have a fucking calculator, okay? The world in complexity is obviously extremely complex and convoluted, but Mother Nature is really simple. She doesn't have a calculator, and all she understands is inertia and acceleration, force and motion, centrifugal, centripetal, rarefaction, compression, charge, and discharge. You have inertia and the loss of inertia. Everything in the universe is two things: loss of inertia and inertia. Inertia precedes the loss of inertia. So you have divergence and you have reintegration. That's why there are no straight lines in the universe. So, next little video, take a quick look and I'll show you very crudely what is going on at the center of the magnet. Center of the ring magnet is extremely simple. When you see it, hopefully you'll have an understanding. If you don't already from watching this, thanks for watching.